And buonasera a tutti. Good evening, y'all. Welcome back. It's another episode of What's the Scoop? After a brief hiatus, as they say, back tonight on, for the first time in a while, Saturday night, October 12th. And I'm excited to be back with y'all this evening. Plenty to talk about in sports right now. Obviously, Major League Baseball dominating most of the headlines with the fact that the postseason is raging on, and we've got now, as of today, both the ALCS and the NLCS matchups are good to go. They're all settled, and we know who's going to be vying for those two World Series spots. In the National Football League, we've got the first coaching firing of the 2024-25 season coming out this past week with the New York Jets, and plenty going on elsewhere as well. So we're going to be digging into all of that and so much more. And as always, if there's anything additional on your mind that is not being discussed currently in the show, simply jump on in that chat and I will be monitoring that and we'll get you all involved. I love hearing what everybody's got to say, what questions are on people's minds, and anything that anybody wants to say to either agree or disagree with anything that I'm saying. Again, like I told my buddy Justin when he was on here once, the show is always better when there's some disagreement and debate going on. Kurt, my buddy, how you doing? Says Scoops, what's up? Kurt, I appreciate you being here tonight. Hope you're doing well. Hope Jenny Hoops is doing well also. Appreciate you jumping on tonight. Actually, Kurt, since you're here, I might as well ask, what do you think? About a quarter of the season in, what are your thoughts on our guy, Bo Nix? Because, I was big on him. Obviously, he struggled coming into start the season, but seems like he's improving a little bit as time goes on. I want to know your thoughts on him as well, since we both know what a big fan I am of him. But while we're doing that, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to start with, I think, what's probably, at least for me, the most prevalent right now in terms of just events in general in professional sports right now, which is the fact that the MLB postseason is well underway. And we've got, as of today, the ALCS and the NLCS matchups are set. They are finalized and they will begin in the next couple of days. The ALCS particularly beginning on Monday. And those matchups in the ALCS, we've got the New York Yankees going up against the Cleveland Guardians. NLCS, we've got the Los Angeles Dodgers going up against the New York Mets. And since I didn't make it last week, I haven't made my prediction on the show yet with regard to the World Series, because I had held on to that for last week, and then, hello. And then at the last minute, I know I did not do the show last week, but I came into this postseason, and I'll be very upfront with everybody, because my initial prediction for the World Series was the Philadelphia Phillies would beat the New York Yankees. And then I watched two games that the New York Mets played. I watched the game where Pete Alonso hit one of the biggest home runs I've ever seen, and I watched their clinching game their clinching game that advanced them from the NLDS to the NLCS. I don't know who's beating this New York Mets club. I don't. I'm astonished isn't even really the right word. I'm perplexed, honestly, by what I'm seeing, because this is a team that was one of the worst teams in baseball, not particularly late into the season. I'm sorry, not particularly early into the season, rather. And I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's vibes. I don't know if it's Coach Mendoza, former right-hand man to Yankees manager Aaron Boone. I don't know really what it is. I know that there's a lot of, there's the whole grimace, silliness. There's the OMG with, what's his name? Jose Iglesias over there. There's a lot of things going on that are inquantifiable, but I just watched that team and I don't know. And I think it's partially also the fact that I'm not a Dodgers believer. I said that at the beginning of the season, and really not much has changed my outlook on that. Yes, they're a very talented roster, but being a very talented roster and being a championship team are not one and the same. And it's just, I don't know. There's been a few times in my life in Major League Baseball where there's just a team that just in my gut, I'm just like, this team just has something that no other team has. I felt that way with the 2018 Red Sox. I felt that way with the 2023 Rangers. And I feel that way right now with the 2024 Mets. So, yeah, I do believe that this year, I think that something tells me this is going to be the New York Mets year. Kurt says, like him a lot. Peyton has to let go of the leash on him, let Bo be Bo. I agree with you on that. Nicole Gizzy chimes in and says, thoughts on the 1996 Super Bowl rematch between the Steelers and the Cowboys last Sunday. Excuse me. Well, for one thing, I'm happy for you at least that you got to use Cowboys and Super Bowl in the same sentence. I know you don't get to do that all that much, but in all seriousness, with regard to the Steelers, I'm just, again, I said last week, if he plays well enough, I don't know how you go back from the Steelers side of things. I don't know how you go back from Justin Fields back to Russell Wilson, and they're not. They're sticking with Justin Fields, to my knowledge, for right now. Now, did Justin Fields have a fantastic passing game? No. He was 15 for 27, threw 2 touchdowns, no picks. Not the highest completion percentage in the world, didn't throw for a ton of yards, but, he definitely, in my opinion, played well enough to win. He was not helped out particularly by the running game. Najee Harris only averaged 3 yards per carry, and they got no touchdowns on the ground. They spread the ball around between all their different receivers quite a bit, but even Najee Harris was also the lead receiver on their team in terms of yards. So they had a hard time getting things going offensively at home last week, which was tough. But from Pittsburgh's side, I don't think that Justin Fields was really the problem in that game. Now, on Dallas' side of things, Dak was what I expect Dak to be. Dak threw the ball a lot. He put up a bunch of yards. He threw for multiple touchdowns, and he turned the ball over a couple times. Now, I don't think that the Cowboys really drew it up that Rico Dowdle would be their lead rusher to this point over Zeke Elliott, but this is more than the first time now that we've seen Dowdle really be that sort of lead back there. He had 20 carries last week, ran for almost 100 yards. So I think it's pretty clear now that McCarthy views, even if they're not going to say it, because I know what Zeke means to Cowboys fans, and they've got that sort of nostalgia factor. I think that they really love to keep with their face players, if you want to say. But I think that Zeke right now is best suited as their second back, and I think that Dowdle is really putting himself forward as the lead back. And then on the receiving side of things, Jalen Tolbert is he was their best receiver, but again, Dallas is showing me that they are what I thought they were. They are a good team in the NFC. I don't think they're one of the best teams in the NFC. I don't think that they are a team that I think is going to win the NFC. But are they going to probably be in the playoffs and have the ability to win a playoff game? Yes, I believe that they are. But I also think, and this is what we said before about Dak. Dak is good enough to get you to the playoffs. There's no denying that. But the reason why they paid him more money, but also made his contract more flexible in the nearer term, is because they see finally what the rest of us have seen for a while, or at least many of us have seen for a while, which is that Dak Prescott is just not going to be the guy who gets you back to where you were in the early 90s. He's just not. And then got some more comments coming in. Mr. Clayton Heron says, hey, guys, smash that like button and share, guys. Mr. Heron, I really appreciate you being on here as always. Says, absolutely lights out defense, and Bo being Bo, our offense is only going to get better. My buddy Trevor says it's another episode of What's the Swift Stoked? This kid says, sorry I had to do it, Scoop. Hope all is well with you. Trevor, appreciate you being on. Absolutely, I am doing well. Hope you are as well. And I'm going to be reaching out soon to catch up with you. Midterms have had me swamped the last week or two, but I'm still going to be reaching out to you soon. So appreciate you being on. Mr. Heron says, Bo setting records already. Let Bo be Bo, baby. Let's go. So clearly, Mr. Heron's got a lot of excitement for Bo Nix, as he should. He was definitely one of my 2 favorite quarterbacks in this year's draft. At least two of the 2 guys that I was most excited about with regard to draft picks and where they went. Obviously, the other one being Jaden Daniels, and he has really, unfortunately, I'm kind of torn on this because obviously I'm very happy that he's proven me right in terms of what he's been able to accomplish. I'm just not thrilled about the fact that it's in the NFC East, but say la vie. Mr. Gizzy says, don't underestimate Dallas, plus Lamb, arguably the premier receiver in the league. Yeah, I don't think I don't think most people are underestimating you. I think what it is I think it's a course correction from the people that I think overestimated them for a while. Because every year, the last 3 or 4 years, I feel like I'm hearing this is Dallas year, this is Dallas year, and I'm not talking about from Dallas fans. I'm talking about like from media pundits and from football people on TV and such. And again, I'm just of the mindset where I'll believe it when I see it. And this is not me being a hater. I'm saying, as a Philadelphia fan, I say the same thing for us because again, we were in the Super Bowl in 2023 and started out last year 10-1 or whatever it was. And ever since then, we've looked nothing like that team. And I say the same thing for us. Like, I'll believe it when I see it. And we have not seen it consistently on this end either. So this is not me, oh, I'm taking every opportunity to pick on Dallas. No, this is, again, you got to put it in front of me for me to be able to stick with it and go forward off of that. That being said, with all that being all of the comments for now, I do want to stick with baseball real quick, and I'm going to jump into there was some sad news that came out this past week, but I do want to address it just because of obviously the historic impact that he had on the game both as a player and otherwise. But rest in peace to Luis Tiante, who was a Cuban starting pitcher for almost 20 years, primarily played for the Boston Red Sox and the then Cleveland Indians, but also spent time with the Minnesota Twins, the New York Yankees, Pittsburgh Pirates, and ended his career with the then California Angels. Tiant was one of the most well-regarded and most successful pitchers in Boston Red Sox history. He had almost 70 career wins above replacement. He had over almost 500 starts. He had almost 200 complete games, which is just insane, especially to think of in this day and age. But again, it just fantastic pitcher. He had a lot of people who respected him outside the game as well for a lot of what he was able to do for his heritage and for people in other countries as well. And excuse me, sorry. And he also did some little nuanced things with regard to he was a episode on an episode of Cheers, and he actually wrote 2 books as well, and was also part of multiple documentary films. So he had a lot going on, not only on the field but off the field as well. Was also the 1996 Summer Olympics pitching coach for the Nicaraguan team. So was always someone who was as involved as he could be in not only the baseball world but otherwise. And may he rest in peace, and my condolences to Red Sox Nation and his many fans from that team and all over baseball. So just wanted to announce that or address that really quickly. Just again, if you're a huge baseball fan, especially if you're a fan of not just the Red Sox but also the New York Yankees, more likely than not, not only who Louis Tiant is, but how influential he was to that rivalry in the 1970s on either side, especially going right from Boston to the Yankees, right at the latter part of that decade as well, when New York was coming off of a couple of their titles, which were kind of, and I don't want to say random, but they were very isolated from the success of the Yankees in the 90s and the success of the Yankees that ended in the early 50s. That it was kind of like their sort of interim period of success there, and then coming off of some of Boston's near misses with regard to potentially breaking that curse in the 1970s. And a big portion of their being able to even try and have that success was thanks to some of the seasons by Tiant in the mid to late 70s as an all-star pitcher. So, excuse me. Moving off of that, speaking of legends in Major League Baseball, and this was really exciting to me to see. So if y'all have heard me talk about managers and coaches in Major League Baseball, not just from a fan perspective, but not just from a Yankees fan perspective, but from a baseball fan perspective, many of y'all, or at least some of y'all, have probably heard me talk about the greatest managers of my life, and I routinely have put longtime Red Sox, Phillies, and Guardians manager Terry Francona atop that list for me. And earlier this past week, I believe it was on Sunday, we learned that Terry Francona is going to be back in the dugout in Major League Baseball in 2025. He has agreed to a deal to be the new manager for the Cincinnati Reds. And when I first heard that, and it really threw me off because I didn't hear it right away. I kind of came back to it after getting some other things done. And I kind of came back to a bunch of discourse about it in this one group chat that I'm in. And my first reaction was, I'm not sure that there will be a team this offseason that makes a more impactful addition to their team, or that there will be a more impactful addition for a team to make this offseason in Major League Baseball than Terry Francona and the Cincinnati Reds. I think that that's just such a fantastic fit for a team that has shown the ability to collect and develop good talent in recent years, but just struggles to put it all together in a way where they actually can go from being good team or, seemingly good team to a team that actually can establish themselves and then actually start to make some noise late in the season. And I think that Terry Francona, that's been Terry Francona's modus operandi. He went to the Phillies, went to the Red Sox, went to the Guardians, and pretty much, I won't say single-handedly, but was a key figure in turning around the fortunes of those three franchises. So from that vantage point, I think that he fits that like a glove. I think that he will get a lot of the respect from the veteran players on that team pretty quickly. And I think also he will have the ability from the younger players to be someone who they'll look up to and say, okay, this is somebody who's been a winner, but this is also somebody who, we know is going to be capable of helping with development as well. Like he knows how to do it with both players. He's not just a veteran manager. He's not just a player manager. He knows how to put these things together and kind of make these parts coalesce. So I'm excited to see what he can do over there, and was really excited to see him be hired by the Cincinnati Reds. I think that he wasn't even really somebody that I was looking at as a potential managerial candidate this offseason, which in retrospect might have been a little bit of a misfire on my part, because I didn't know whether or not he'd want to manage again, but if you consider that he'd want to manage again, then he would have been an obvious candidate for, I think, most teams. And again, just congrats to the Cincinnati Reds and Reds fans on picking him up, because I think that it's going to make your team better. I think that single move is going to make your team better at a margin that I think is going to eclipse that any other move can make this offseason. Moving off of that, we're talking, and as talking about managers and such, because I feel like every show, or at least almost every show, whether you're a Yankees fan or not, I get this question so many times, or this comment so many times, and it's some combination of Yankees need to fire Aaron Boone, Yankees need to fire Brian Cashman, Yankees need to clean house, et cetera, et cetera. And the question that I always ask in response is always the same, or at least some variation of the same, which is, okay, let's assume that we fired Aaron Boone. Let's assume that we fired Brian Cashman, or let's assume both. Who are we bringing in? Like, what's the follow-up? And one name that I get a lot is Don Mattingly, which I have expressed my lack of interest in doing. I've heard the name Mark DeRosa a couple times, which I know my buddy Kenny is a big fan of. And again, that's a conversation we can have in terms of at the managerial. I'm just talking at the managerial level now, by the way. I'm not talking about GM right now. But so I decided that I wanted to take this question and kind of go a little bit deeper with everything, and dig in and see, okay, what would I actually do if put in the situation where I was asked that question? So, assuming that Aaron Boone's contract expires at the end of the season and they don't assume the option for next season, which I believe is a 1-year option, what would my process, what would my course of action be thereafter? And I was talking to a buddy of mine out in California about this earlier this week, who's also a Yankees fan. And I started thinking about what are the criteria that I'd want. So first and foremost, I wouldn't want another first-time manager. I want somebody who was experienced, and I want someone who had postseason experience. He doesn't have to have even won postseason games yet, because there's a lot of managers who it didn't go well in their first time and they learned from their mistakes. In the second gig, it went a lot better. There's a lot of managers who have this as an example, Joe Girardi being one, Joe Torre being, there's multiple managers to whom that can apply. But I want him to at least have some sense of postseason experience. 2, I want a guy who knows what it means to manage in a big market. It's just different managing in a place like New York than than a lot of other places. And I don't want somebody. I mean, we've seen it happen with players recently about getting all of our players from Oakland and having them turn into pumpkins. Happy Halloween. But just I don't want somebody who spent their entire career in Oakland and Pittsburgh. I want somebody who I at least can have some better sense that he's battle tested on a bigger scale. Doesn't have to necessarily be New York, but so I did a little bit of research, and basically from a metric standpoint, the teams that are considered quote unquote true major market are the Yankees, Red Sox, Giants, Cubs, and Dodgers. So they check this box for me if they have managerial experience with at least one of those 5 clubs. I want somebody who's managed in the last 10 years. I want somebody who's managed in the StatCast era. Whether you like it or not, the StatCast era has evolved and developed a lot of ways that teams are approaching player development and teams are approaching game planning, but also the way that players themselves are approaching how they train, how they handle nutrition, how they work on things in practice, how they work on different aspects of preparing themselves and building themselves up as players, either as to correct something or to improve something that is already a strong point. So I want somebody who has a good handle on that and who's not one of these people who's basically said, I'm allergic to this, I'm shunning this, and I like people like John Madden who literally walked away from the game, or Mike Scioscia who literally walked away from the game because of it. That's fine. If you're not comfortable with it, that's fine. But at least acknowledge the fact that means that you're not a fit for where the game is at right now, not that your mentality is going to try and fit a square peg in which was becoming an increasingly round hole. Which leads me to my last point. And I kind of just touched on this, but shown a willingness to either embrace analytics, sabermetrics, advanced metrics, etc., or at bare minimum doesn't have the significant wind behind him that alleges his indignance or resistance to adapt to the changing of the game that I just mentioned in recent years and the evolution in that space. So I'll call this the Kurt Valenti check mark. Somebody who I think would be more willing to kind of try and bridge the gap between players. Because again, I'll cite that same player poll a couple months ago from The Athletic. Almost 9 out of 10 players agree that the recent scientific and data science developments made within the game have helped their career and helped their development. And something like that I don't think is going away anytime soon. And so these are the criteria that I worked off of. And just to kind of do a summation one more time, that was postseason managerial experience, big market experience, manager in the last 10 years, and willingness to embrace the sort of data science trends within the game. So with those 2 in mind, I pulled 2 names. And those 2 names were former Cubs manager David Ross and former Giants and Phillies manager Gabe Kapler. And I'll talk about both of them. First of all, David Ross, I think a lot of people believe that he got screwed because, the Cubs, when he left Milwaukee, the Cubs pounced on Craig Counsell. And I think that had that not happened, I don't think that they were intent on moving off of David Ross until they believed that they could get him. And I don't think that David Ross was a bad manager by any stretch. Again, he met every criterion that I listed. And I think that I know that they had a conversation with him about a coaching role in the last 12 months, but he was looking to hopefully hold out for another managerial position. So I think that is probably the first call that I would make would be to David Ross. Secondly, the other name that I mentioned, and this is somebody of whom I've spoken highly for a while, and I think that both places that he left, I thought were under very unfair circumstances to him, which was Gabe Kapler, former manager of the Giants and the Phillies, and is now the assistant general manager for the Miami Marlins, God help his soul. So I think that, again, this is not somebody who was let go of because his teams were terrible. or at least that they were terrible with respect to the rosters that he was given. I think that it's clear that his managerial style is a little bit different, if you want to say, maybe a little bit considered unorthodox. But he, excuse me, but he's been able to get teams to the playoffs. He's spoken a decent amount about his emphasis on nutrition and on, like I mentioned, sports science, and on these sort of rigid training regimens that it's clear that he's got a program, and you either buy into it or you don't. And that can be a little bit challenging, and he doesn't strike me as a my way or the highway type of coach, but he does strike me as somebody who is got a little bit of that sort of presence, alpha dog type of manager to him. And something that I think can't be understated with these two guys, and as I mentioned in both of their cases, they both, I think, got a bit of a raw deal in their last jobs in terms of being let go and the circumstances under which they were let go. And they strike me both as somebody who would use that as an added fuel and hunger to prove themselves and the next team that took a chance on them. And I wouldn't be surprised if the next team got a bit of a boost just from that type of energy alone. That's sort of coming in and the sense that he's out there to prove something and he wants to rally his guys in order to do the same. Similar to what we've seen that sort of underdog mentality in the past from players. It wouldn't surprise me if either or both of these guys went into a locker room and sort of brought that ethos in with them. So a couple of you guys have asked me several times, who would my guys be if I were trying to address a managerial vacancy for the Yankees this offseason. Those are my criteria. Those are my two guys. If I had to choose one over the other, probably would go with David Ross, but it's very close. So, excuse me. That being said, that's pretty much the most of where I'm at with baseball right now. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to NFL because, excuse me, as I mentioned, the National Football League saw its first coaching transition this past week, or its first coaching change of the season this past week. And that was the New York Jets firing head coach Robert Saleh, which I think the best way that I can say it is, and I think I was far from alone in this, where it wasn't firing Saleh that really surprised me. It was the timing under which it happened and the circumstances under which it happened. They were 2-3 at the time of his firing, which again, not great, but we've seen coaches get a lot more rope into their third, maybe fourth season than he did. And we hadn't heard a lot of, I don't know if the word allegations is correct, but there hadn't been a lot of talk that there was particular, unrest or dysfunction within the locker room. They finally had Aaron Rodgers healthy. I mean, I know he had a bad game last week, and again, I'm not saying that I'm shocked that Robert Saleh got fired, but to fire him when they did, and also with and again, it's hard to kind of 100% know how much of this is confirmed or true or whatnot, but some of the biggest names within NFL reporting were saying things akin to that he was blindsided that morning, that he came in prepared to work and then was told he was let go, that he was escorted out by security, that he did not have a final meeting with his players like most coaches do when they are fired. Just a very bizarre set of circumstances. And again, I can't 100% tell you how much of that is accurate, so I don't want to say like I'm putting my name on the fact that every single thing of these happened, but those were things that were widely discussed on Tuesday and Wednesday when it first happened. And again, the New York Jets, again, when you're a Jet all the way, to quote West Side Story, because I don't understand what they gain from making this transition now compared to in a couple of weeks from now. Especially because the coach that they went to was one of their defensive assistants, Matt Olbrich. So, and this is a defensive coach that you're replacing with one of his top associates. So maybe the personality will be a little bit different, but you're going to somebody who was already in the room. and you're going to somebody who was on that same side of the ball, and you're going to somebody who was one of the most leaned on assistants by the guy that you just fired. So I don't know how much you were expecting to change with that. There were a lot of people, myself included, who were frankly worried about the fact that they could potentially be making the move to promote Nate Hackett as to head coach. And that was not the case. And some people think it could still be the case down the road as when the full-time hire is made after this season. I have my doubts about that. I feel like if they were going to make Hackett the long-term head coach, they would do it now, not after the season. But again, it's the Jets. You never really know what Woody Johnson and company are going to do, which I hate to say because I thought when Joe Douglas went over there, I thought things were going to change for the better. And for a period of time, it looked like they had. But things, blank always runs downhill from the top. And, again, Joe Douglas can't control, who he works for. He can only control who works for him. So that's where things are at right now. And it just goes back to the fact that, and again, I know this is a while ago now, so it's long since old news, but I really think that if they had a do-over, if they had a mulligan, I really think that they would not let go of Rex Ryan, because the fact that he had the quarterbacks that he did, that he had the offenses that he did, that he had the personnel that he did, both coaching and playing, he did not have a terrible record for any of those quarterbacks that he had. And he went on to Buffalo, which, again, Buffalo, I know that those sides, kind of wore on each other quickly, even though I don't think that he did a terrible job there either for the hand that he was dealt, because obviously Buffalo was nowhere near the Buffalo that they are now. But the fact that they went from him and then they went to Todd Bowles, they had Adam Gase, they had Robert Saleh, they have not been able to even come close to replicating what they had with him, or even with his predecessor. I think it was his immediate predecessor in Eric Mangini. So, and again, this is going on 10 plus years history at this point, but I think a lot of people now are looking back and thinking, you know what, dang it, maybe kicking him out the door just because he was a bit of a fireball or all of that. Maybe it's not the worst thing in the world, because sometimes the good head coaches, sometimes, again, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes they're the big personalities, sometimes they're the alpha dogs, sometimes they're a little bit puffing their chest out a little bit, but he was winning games, especially in a relative perspective to what he had to work with. So, and Trevor says, Hackett will not be calling the offensive plays, makes a Saleh firing even more odd. Saleh was reportedly going to do the same thing. Yeah, so what I heard was that Saleh was prepared to fire Nate Hackett that morning, and that was not what led to it, but that was relevant in the move that ultimately ensued. Again, I don't know, I don't know that we'll ever know exactly, what was going to happen and what led to what. I don't know that flow chart or that sort of chain of events, or I know what phrase I'm looking for. I just can't call it to mind right now. But I don't know that we'll ever have that information in true clarity and detail. But if he wanted to fire Nate Hackett and the front office said no, and as a result fired Saleh, then in my opinion, the person who got the best out of that deal was Saleh, as he got out of there, because there was just no winning for him in that situation. Now, obviously, a lot of the eyes, not too shortly thereafter, turned to Aaron Rodgers, and what influence did he have in this? Was he behind wanting to keep Hackett? And so he basically sort of tied the front office's hands to fire Saleh because Saleh was going to fire Hackett. Was there some sort of looped spider web tie in there? I'm not 100% no. I'm not 100% in the know on that, but I'm not rushing to believe that Rodgers was behind this like a lot of people are, but I don't know. It's just 9 out of 10 times, even if I don't agree with a firing or I don't agree with a coaching change, I can usually understand it. And this one, there's just a smell to this one that I just cannot identify. And I've spent 5 days trying to do so, and I'm no more able to do so than I was when I first heard about it. Trevor says, I don't think Saleh was going to fire Hackett. I think he was going to demote him. Thank you for correcting me on that. Excuse me, sorry. Thank you for correcting me on that. Because you are correct. I misspoke there. Saleh knew something needed to change on the offensive side of the ball. So thank you to Trevor for that one. Jody says Bama is in massive trouble. I mean, I'm not going to 100% disagree with you that they're in trouble. I think massive trouble is a little bit of a stretch. Again, doesn't look great that they lost to Vanderbilt last week, obviously. And they definitely, I do not understand why you don't just burn the clock there and why you you had a 99% win probability if you just burnt the clock at the end there and then it was done. I don't know why you gave them the ball back, why you went for another score and then gave them the ball back in extra time. Like I don't understand some of the coaching decisions that were made there, and play calling decisions that were made there. They did ultimately win the game, albeit in a much more perspiration-inducing fashion than I would have liked and that most fans would have liked. But again, and this is what I'll say, yes, they lost to Vanderbilt last week, and it was not good. Yes, this game got closer than it should have been. This is still the same team that 2 weeks ago, for the third time, has beaten a team that no other team can beat in the last couple of months or last couple of years. Going back to, I think it's 2021, the only team that can play Georgia like that has been Alabama. And that has to count for something. In fact, let me double check because I know that they were playing against our hometown team here, Mississippi State. So actually, I'm going to double check that score real quick just to give an update for those who I'm sure are either watching or listening to this or both. Okay, yeah. So Georgia ended up winning by 10 at home to Mississippi State. Final score was 41-31. So, but again, like I agree that those two factors in the beginning have to count. But I also think if you're going to count those things, then you also have to count the fact that they beat Georgia the way that they did. And then people are going to tell me, oh, it was the second half, or they only were leading in the first half. Okay, games are 4 quarters long. Like it's hard for me to splice and dice up these games into saying it's like similar to me when we're evaluating a player's career, and you can take any sport, football, baseball, whatever, and you say, well, take out his 2 best years, he doesn't look so great. I'm like, yeah, because you're taking out his 2 best years. You can also take out his 2 worst years and he looks even better. So it's like that sort of manipulation with data, and that's a tough thing with regard to data. With regard to data, is the fact, again, given enough, tools or whatever you want to say, you can really manipulate data to look a million different ways. But again, yes, I do think this is the Bama team that I do think this is still the Bama team that beat Georgia a couple weeks ago. And yeah, they are now the Bama team that has the blemish on their record of losing to Vandy. And they are now the team that, just had this, what should never have been a thriller against in this game earlier today. But at the end of the season, if I'm looking at this schedule, and again, we have no idea how the rest of it's going to play out. But if I'm looking at the end of the season and what's coming into question for me are specifically these 2 games, or I'm sorry, these 3 games rather, and I'm honing in on this part of the schedule, if I'm saying this is, that's a black mark that they lost to Vandy, then it better, I'm not saying it should cancel it out, but it better be just as much talked about that they beat Georgia again the week before. And again, they beat Georgia the week before. This is, and if you want to talk about, this is not the same team as it was with Nick Saban, okay, then wouldn't that make the fact that they beat Georgia even more impressive if it's quote unquote not the same team, whether you're talking about personnel players, whether you're talking about coaching, if it's not the same team or if it doesn't have the same juice that it did with Saban, and they still won that game, and they still came out of this one with a W, even though it got closer than whatever you want to say. I'm in no way saying, Bama should, have, because they beat Georgia, Bama should have an automatic buy-in to the CFP. I'm in no way saying that. But people who were declaring the season over because they lost to Vandy last week, and or because of what happened in the fourth quarter today, let's let the season play out a little bit more, because I object to the fact that people, and I'm not saying that Jody was saying this, but I object to the fact that people are saying that certain things that should hold a certain amount of weight, but then they ignore the other aspects because those don't suit the same narrative that they're trying to push. And again, I'm in no way saying that was Jody's angle there. I'm just saying that elements of what I'm saying tie into those arguments that I am seeing from other people. We got on Twitch, we've got Diggs BTW1 saying, "Hi, what's up?" I'm not quite sure who this is, but how you doing? I'm glad to have you on tonight. Hope you're having a good weekend. So, excuse me. Coming off of that, we had, excuse me, there is still NFL games going on into tomorrow that still want to talk about a little bit. I'll talk a little bit more about the day-to-day. Oh, hang on a second. Okay, I love when this happens. We got news that just came in on the show. It's just coming in the last 10 minutes or so. Adam Schefter is reporting that on Tuesday at the NFL Fall Owners Meeting in Atlanta, Tom Brady is expected to be approved as a minority owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. That was something that had been in discussion for a while. That was something that had been expected to be, something that had expected to be materializing fairly soon, but it's now become official, or at least it appears it's going to become official in a couple days. So for anybody who was still holding on to their conspiracy theory or their sort of pipe dream that Tom Brady could come back and continue to play, it does not appear that is something that he is targeting doing. And I will say this, and again, I think anybody who, how do I want to say this? I think anybody who grew up a non-Patriots fan watching football between the years 2009 and 2018, if you weren't a Patriots fan, most likely you hated Tom Brady. You very much likely respected him, but you hated Tom Brady. Obviously, it was a lot easier for me not to hate Tom Brady after February 4th, 2018. But once he went to Tampa, and then since he's retired, I encourage y'all, go listen to his show on YouTube, go listen to his podcast, go find some of the interviews that he's done with ESPN. This guy, I mean, obviously we know that he is either the GOAT or the, if you want to put him number 2 now with Pat Mahomes, but we know that he's up there in that sort of at bare minimum top 2 in sort of what I guess would probably be the NFL's version right now of Jordan versus LeBron or whatever. But those dynamics notwithstanding, listening to this guy talk about football and listening to this guy just talk about how he approached the game, whether it's from an X's and O's standpoint or just from a dog mentality standpoint, I love listening to him talk. I love listening to the way that he discusses things. I love listening to the insight that he has. I love listening to him do commentary in the booth. I've gained a lot of. I mean, I wouldn't say that I ever particularly disrespected him, but I think that he definitely has gained a lot of respect from me, and quite frankly, the guy's funny. The guy's funny to listen to at times. Like he will. He told this one story. I don't know what show it was on, but I encourage y'all to go look it up. He told this one story about going up against the Dolphins after they signed Ndamukong Suh. Y'all got to go listen to it because I can't do it justice if I try and relay it on here. But yeah, I definitely somebody I've had an evolution on in the past. What would it be? 7 years. Jody says, "Is Fanjo washed as?" Excuse me. Is Fanjo washed as a defensive coordinator? Um, I don't think I would say he's washed. I don't think that that's somewhere that I'd go into right now. Now again, I struggle sometimes with the fact that I think sometimes coaches take a certain level of ire for things that I think should be put on the players because they're the ones actually out, either making the plays or not making the plays. So to me, it's kind of fuzzy sometimes as to what I'm holding against players versus what I'm holding against the coach. Now, looking at things from a standpoint of defense, in terms of yards allowed, just looking at that real quick. In terms of yards allowed, they're one of the worst teams in the NFL. They are bottom. Excuse me, they are bottom 6 in that metric per game, and they have one fewer game played than than a lot of other teams because they had a bye last week, which is why I'm using the average per game. But they're bottom 6 in terms of um, yards per game. And then when you break that down to passing and rushing, it gets worse when you look at it from that standpoint. There's not really either one that they're particularly terrible at. It's just that they're below average at both, which makes it worse. So it's it's kind of challenging because normally in the past, I've seen them either be really atrocious in run defense or really atrocious in pass defense. But right now, there's not really one area that I can sort of pinpoint. Now, again, they have been hurt due to injuries. Hurt due to injuries. That was a great word choice, but they have been battling injuries a little bit. Although I will say that I don't think that the injuries that they've sustained mean that their defense should be as sketchy as it's been at times. However, if I'm being honest, what's concerning me more than that, and again, this is a team that has one of the second worst actually, turnover differential in the entire league, which means that it's -6, which means that they've turned over the ball 6 times more than they've taken advantage of a turnover by the other team. And as I'm looking at the breakdown of that even more, that is 6 interceptions and 4 fumbles, which helps me to. No, I'm sorry, 4 interceptions and 4 fumbles. I apologize. Which leads me to what I was going to say. And I love you, man, but Jalen Hurts has got to be more consistent and more consistently better than he's been. It's not sustainable to be 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, passer rating of 85. I don't really have an issue with his yards per attempt. I don't even have an issue with his completion percentage at 68%, or his yards per game at 232. But it's just he tries to do this almost Brett Favre, Josh Allen-esque hero ball type of thing when he doesn't need to do so. And I know I've talked about it in the past, so I don't want to belabor the point for too long. And again, he was missing for a period of time. He was missing A.J. Brown. He was missing, he was missing his right tackle. He missed Devontae Smith for one game. He had not a ton of depth at receiver a couple times. And for whatever reason, the one knock I will make on the offensive coaching staff right now, I don't understand. And they did this the first half of the year a couple years ago when they went on to eventually have a hot streak at the end of the season. But that was when they first originally found their identity as a power running team. the start of the season, they had tried to start making that happen, and then when it would start working, they would go to a pass-heavy attack. So they'd completely pivot away from what was working. And now I'm seeing them start to do the same stuff again with Saquon. Like Saquon will get into a rhythm, and then they'll have Hurts, throw the ball, maybe 7 times in a row. And I just don't understand. Now, Hurts can be a decent, not decent. Hurts can be a solid passer, but last week, he threw the ball 30 times, which is not terrible by any stretch. I think that's a pretty average number. Now, again, he was not helped by the fact that last week his offense was so banged up. I was in no way surprised that they lost that game to Tampa Bay. But I'll see these instances where he will get on these, he'll go on these sort of strings where he feels like he feels like he has to sort of prove himself to his team, like reestablish himself to his team, or I don't even know what. But it's really hard for me to understand why he is so intent this far into his career on just having this, I got to be Superman mentality, because it very seldom has worked out when I've seen any quarterback have that, whether it was Favre, whether it was A-Rod, whether it was Josh Allen. I very seldom see a quarterback have that happen and it work out in their favor. And I'm seeing no different from Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was at his best, in the beginning of last season and the lead up to the 2023 Super Bowl. He was at his best when he was flanked by, the power game around him. And, again, I think that his best attributes are his intangibles. And that's not to knock his game at all. I think that he has leadership abilities as a quarterback that I think a lot of teams would love to have in their locker room. But in terms of what he's able to do on the field, and again, I believe that deal, when they signed it, I believe that was a good deal to make. But looking at what he's done as a passer just this season, I mean, I'm struggling to figure out where he's going to, make these massive changes, particularly on, if you're in one of the, 8 out of 10 times where they're not running off of play action, I just don't understand how they regression mentally come on, because you put him in these designed passing plays, and I mean, even when he's put up for screens and whatnot, then obviously that helps his numbers a little bit. So if you take that out, it kind of shifts things a little bit against his favor. But just in trying to look at the sort of the breakdown for him, I mean, there's nothing really that you can pull and say, oh, this is something that really has been challenging him or whatever. He's not done well under pressure, but even when he's in a clean pocket, 2 of his picks came in a clean pocket. So yeah, it's very hard to pinpoint. The one thing I will say is just holding on to the ball too dang long. There is, holding on for almost 3.5 seconds in a lot of cases. I don't care how good your O-line is, especially if you don't have Kelsey anymore and you didn't have Johnson for a period of time. Not something that I want to see, and not something that's going to help going forward. But there's no clear way to kind of identify what changes need to be made. But I definitely think that they start there with respect to decision making and to what I just said with holding the ball too long. Reports Cooper will start at CB on Sunday. Yes, I agree with that. Not I agree with that. I meant to say that I've heard that. Jody says Hurts might be a Jag. Hurt plays like he is a Jag. If you don't mean Jaguar, like Jacksonville Jaguars, which I'm assuming you don't, I'm struggling to understand that reference. If you don't mind clarifying that, please, Jody. Um, but so, but that's what I'm going to have to see going forward. I'm going to wrap it up a little bit with going back to uh, baseball for a little bit because I said I wanted to talk about something with regard to the Yankees. And before I get into that, for those who haven't heard and who were following for that, Luis Gil is expected to return to the rotation in the ALCS. Garrett Cole is starting game 2, and Gil is expected to start either game 3 or game 4, which likely means game 1 will come down to either Rodon or Schmidt. Based on Schmidt's relative lack of experience in those types of games, plus what they're paying Rodon, my belief is that Rodon will ultimately get the game 1 start, but again, we don't know for 100% just yet. There was also an interesting discussion that happened earlier in the week with regard to Juan Soto, and people asked, or people were speculating, would Aaron Judge's contract hinder what the Yankees were willing to offer Juan Soto, whatever the case may be, which I thought was hogwash to begin with, but yeah, and pretty much everything I've heard since then, if anybody heard any of that stuff, pretty much everything I've heard since then is that no, they in no way are going to limit what they're offering Soto based on Aaron Judge, which they shouldn't. Frankly, if Juan Soto wants to match Shohei Ohtani's contracts, I would say here, blank check, write the details, because I think it's very evident that this team is held together by a nucleus that is largely that is mostly taken up of Judge and Soto, and also that when one is in the lineup without the other, they are not the same lineup. They're not the same team, and individually, they're not the same players. I think Judge feeds off of Soto, and Soto feeds off of Judge. To have had the incredible seasons that they each did, which are going to place them as 2 of the top 3 AL MVP vote receivers this year, likely only separated by Bobby Witt from the now eliminated Royals. But yeah, it doesn't sound like that's going to be something that happens, and frankly, I don't think it should. Jody says just another guy. Yeah, I need to see a little bit longer before I'm that unconfident. It's not a word. Before I'm that down on him, I guess. But again, you got to show it to me. I'm not going to be able to hold on to it forever that you played well in 2023 Super Bowl if we're almost to the 2025 Super Bowl, and this has been the story now for a year. Why can't hello? There we go. Jody asks, why can't Judge hit in the playoffs? My gut reaction is hoping that what he was able to do toward the end of the Royal Series is now his ability to turn a corner. However, there's no denying the legitimacy and the truth to what you just said. And it got past a point where it was not just him struggling in the playoffs. He was doing historically badly in the playoffs. And I'm going to pull up the information real quick that I had in front of me with regard to that, because again, it kind of reminds me almost of, and this is the comparisons between these two players don't go far beyond this, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of the whole A-Rod situation where he was a menace pretty much every regular season, but for whatever reason, he struggled when it came to October. And I don't know if we're seeing that again now with Judge, but the fact of the matter is that, again, he has become hard to watch almost overnight in the postseason. As I'm trying to get that postseason data up, but the excuse me. Again, I'm not sure what you saw yesterday. But he did have there were even a couple of instances where I will give him this. He got very solid contact, and he just got unlucky. He either hit it right to somebody, whatever the case may be. So there is a little bit of that in the factor as well, but it is just hard to watch sometimes. But to go back to your actual question, and for people who don't know, I'll read this out. The postseason statistics for Judge in 2020 hit. I'm going over the last 4 years. In 2020, hit 133 OPS 662. In 2022, 139 OPS 490. This year, 154 OPS 620. I didn't read 2021 because he only played one game. But yeah, again, and that's something I have been trying to break into a little bit more with respect to sort of the differences that I can see, and I will continue to do that more going into next week. Hopefully, it'll only be off of a shorter pool of data. Hopefully, I'm not still talking about him being this bad a week from now, because if he is, there's a good chance that we're staring down the barrel of potential elimination in the ALCS, and I hope that I'm not in that situation a week from now. But just he becomes one of the things that I definitely can say is that he becomes more of a pull attempt hitter than a spray hitter during the postseason. And I think that probably doesn't help all that much. But even as such, there's no real, there's nothing really that jumps out to me immediately in terms of what is wrong with him. He says if Boone was a good manager, he'd move Judge down in the lineup. I don't. I have to double check. I don't know if they've said anything about what he's going to do in the ALCS. Now, I will say, that being said, when you have guys who play off of each other like Judge and Soto do, it's really hard to break that up because, again, I think if you move Judge down in the lineup, you're not just risking hurting him, you're risking hurting Soto as well. I'm not necessarily not advocate. Not Let me rephrase that. I could be talked into moving Judge down in the lineup. I don't think that's a terrible idea, but I think that you'd have to really think about how you're using that. Not only how's that affecting him, but how's that affecting Soto? Where are you putting him as a result of this? And then how does that affect some of the other guys that hit in that part of the order as well? Because I think it's easy to just say, "Oh, this guy needs to be demoted," but especially when you've got something that's been sort of the bedrock and the nucleus of your offense all year, which has been that part of the lineup, I think you're not just dealing with, okay, I'm just going to move a struggling hitter down, which again, I'm not 100% against, but it would be a more strategic. You'd have to be more delicately strategic with it, I think, than you would in most circumstances, just based on the specifics of the situation at hand. And with that being said, I've kicked a little bit past the buzzer here. I want to appreciate everybody who was on tonight, whether that was, I'm talking Jody. We had a surprise viewer in from Twitch for the first time. I want to appreciate you for that. My buddy Trevor was in quite a bit. Mr. Gizzy, Joe, hope you're doing well, buddy. Mr. Heron, as always, was very involved, and Kurt making his reappearance here as well. Appreciate it from everybody. And for those of y'all who did watch and just kind of stayed out of the chatter tonight, greatly appreciate every one of y'all. I hope everybody has a great night. Hope everybody has a great day watching football tomorrow. Hopefully my Eagles can go and beat Cleveland. Sorry, Grandpa, but we need this one. And then hope everybody has a great rest of your week. And hopefully next week when I'm on again talking about baseball on the 19th, hopefully it's in a positive light with the Yankees, but only time will tell. In the meantime, as I said, have a great week, and I'll be back next Saturday, October 19th, same scoop time, same scoop channel. Scoop out.